And that's an important point too with screenings. If your child passes the screening, then some people will assume that that's done and dusted. But vision problems can develop over time. So you want to be able to check kids and have a full exam at critical times in their learning development. And so around the beginning of school, so prep grade 1 is when you want to see them. If there's a family history or concerns around the potential for sort of learning problems, then we might want to see them every year. But certainly in the absence of any problems, I'd be checking back in around the grade 3 zone, because that's when traditionally the kids move from learning how to read to using reading for learning as a tool for learning. And what we also see is the print size gets a lot smaller. There's less pictures to look at for contextual cues, and there's a greater volume of print in addition to being asked to remember and comprehend a lot more out of reading. So grade 3 is a critical time where there's a lot more pressure on the visual system. And so, we've done screenings where our comprehensive screenings that we've done in the past, we might pick up some convergence problems as an example in year 1 students, but they're relatively asymptomatic at that time. But that's an important thing to pick up, because we can then have a discussion with the parents to say, you need to be looking out for, loss of place, loss of interest, any sort of change in trajectory. And then the kids are doing this, and then suddenly they start to flatten out in their interest or their ability. They start getting headaches, they start getting sore eyes, those sorts of things. So it's a flag to say, look out for these potential things. Now, when we go and see those kids back in year 3, they're the ones who pop up and now they're getting symptoms. And so it just needed the workload to be high enough that it put more pressure on a visual system that wasn't quite ready to do those tasks.
So I guess it's a bit like carrying a backpack to school. So the kids can carry it up to a point, but when you start loading them up with too many books, too much of a load, that's when things start to go wrong. So I guess the visual system's kind of similar in that way. Is that right?
Yeah, and one of my mentors, used a great analogy of, and he was from the Midwest farming areas of the US, and so he'd talk about carrying a sack of potatoes. And so if you carry a sack of potatoes and you're kind of leaning in to carry it, well, if you do it for a short period of time, when you're kind of, you stretch and your posture goes back to normal. But if you do it hour after day after day, you're going to have some changes in posture. So you can have this chronic stress over time, which eventually leads to a lack of flexibility and some issues.
Which I guess leads to my next question, which is, are you seeing more vision problems now than you did, say, 10 or 20 years ago?
Yeah, there's possibly a little bit more awareness around, but certainly we know that myopia is a very popular subject at the moment, and we certainly know that's on the increase. And so we certainly see vision problems in kids who we may not have in the past, because I sort of talk to parents about this, is that, when you and I were growing up, if you weren't into academic activities, then you often ended up outside doing other things, whereas it doesn't matter what your academic level or interests are. Most people spend inside in time. And what does that mean? Well, we're usually using a device where we're sort of on a tablet or on a computer, and that captures your attention for a long period of time. So yeah, certainly we're seeing a bigger increase in vision problems. And the challenging part is, again, myopia, we can kind of go, well, at some point the child starts not being able to see things in the distance like the rest of the family. And that's how my myopia was picked up. We're in the car on a family trip and everyone's laughing at a bumper sticker on a car. And I was the one closest to the bumper sticker and couldn't actually see it. So you've got that comparison for myopia. But if you've got, focusing and eye teaming and tracking problems, then you may not necessarily kind of jump and recognize that might be a vision problem if you're using your child's ability to see the bird flying or the plane flying in the sky as a reference point.
So what are some of the practical things that parents can do at home to support healthy visual development?
The big one is, just look at technology, look at the stuff, and obviously parents are a different generation. We're starting to get parents who have grown up with devices and all the rest of it. So, I used to say, take away all the things that we didn't have as kids and get them outside. So you really want to limit screen time. You want to get kids moving. So the big one is just kids don't move enough. It's good for visual system. It's good for overall development and learning, is kids have to move and interact with the world. So probably the number one thing, if you really wanted to kind of lean into something, is, just really minimize device use. Look, I know it's a good, you want that spare half an hour and it's a good babysitter. I think we need to perhaps try a bit harder to find other things for kids to get engaged in. And I know certainly I'm a parent of 3 kids, and we had those temptations ourselves. And when we did remove them, there was a bit of noise initially, but over time they eventually found other things to do that we can see are a much healthier sort of pastime. And because of we just have an interest in learning overall, then probably the other things is that parents modelling good reading and good reading habits would be the other thing. While that's sort of not strictly vision, it's all part of development. So if you're going to be doing near activities, then reading to your child's one of the best things you can do.
Yeah. So I guess sometimes it comes back to do as I do, not do as I say. So you've got to model good habits as well.
Absolutely, and there is something to be said about missed opportunities as a parent. If your attention's on a phone, you don't make eye contact, you don't have that opportunity to communicate, and life is education for kids. And so if you're disengaged because you're engaged in the phone or elsewhere, then they're missing out on an opportunity as well.